I grew up watching YouTube videos all about the legends of the black-eyed children and what to do and what not to do if a set of them showed up at your door. This was always one of the scariest stories to me. I've actually never made any content about it or anything because it does terrify me. So you can imagine that I have not been doing well on TikTok lately. People with the entirety of their eye completely black are being spotted right and left, and I don't appreciate it. While every single story is terrifying in its own way, there is one in particular that I want to talk about because it just didn't feel right in my gut. So it happened to someone on here that goes by this username, and he was just minding his business walking down his street. He felt someone staring at him, like, you know how you can feel just someone staring at you and like kind of walking a bit too close behind you? Well, he felt that. So he stops, he turns around, and he sees someone with the entirety of their eye blacked out. Not only that, this person looks at him and smiles.
Swear to God, on my mother's grave, this guy's eyes was jet fucking black. Jet fucking black. Just sit there smiling like that, man.
They follow him almost to his house. Like, he could see them on the corner of the street in front of his house.
I come home. I'm sitting out there where my street is. At that fucking corner right there, but I stopped saying that motherfucker was standing right fucking there, dude.
He goes inside to get something to defend himself in case he needs to, and then when he comes back outside, that person has vanished. When I was watching his video, I could literally feel how scared he was, and it made me more terrified. I don't know why sightings of these things are ramping up, but I have seen video after video of it happening. There are a lot of different theories. Some people say it's just people with like the whites of their eyes tattooed. I don't think that's the case. That's not as common as people are making it out to be in these comments. I've also seen theories that it could be aliens. People were saying maybe this is what that woman saw on the plane. I'm pretty sure she came out and said that that was not even a thing, but I've seen that happen a lot. I just know that I don't want to encounter it, and I have never been more grateful that I cannot really focus on things far away. Like, if you're like 10 feet in front of me and have blacked out eyes, I'm not gonna know. You're a blur. I don't know. But I'm not a fan of the trend that is happening right now. So I'm editing right now, and I went to his page to grab those videos to insert them, and he has a few updates. Go check out all of them because there's a few videos, and I actually don't have time to watch them all myself right now as well, but I think he got one of these people on video, and I'm gonna insert it right now.
The motion sensor went off. There's that fucking goddamn, you see that? You see that? Look at him. You can't even see his fucking head. I told you. I think with his arms, dude.
Just wait until you hear this black-eyed child story from North Carolina, okay? It's in Asheville, if you're familiar. So this guy emails and he says that he and his girlfriend just moved into this new apartment because the place that they were living at got sold from underneath them. And he said it's not normally an area that they would live in, but his girlfriend is due with their first baby next month, and so they just needed to find a place. And he said, you know, eventually the plan is to move somewhere else, but for now they're subletting this apartment, and it's in this old kind of rundown building, and it's just a walk up. There's no elevator or anything like that. And he said the first day they moved in, which was about a month ago, there's a knock at the door, and they answer, and there's this old woman. She's got stringy gray hair, and she looked like something out of a horror movie, just like very, very old, missing teeth, and she's holding a fruitcake, but they don't want to be rude, and so she says, you know, have this, I'm your new neighbor. And he said they looked at the fruitcake and it was moldy and it had like this weird film over it, but they didn't want to be rude and they didn't really feel like inviting her in. But again, she was being polite and introducing herself. So they're like, okay, come on in. She says, no, it's okay. I just wanted to drop this off and give you a warning not to answer knocks late at night. And they think because of the area, she's talking about break-ins or crime or something like that. So they just say, okay, thank you. We won't answer the door late at night. Don't really think too much of it, right? But a couple nights go by and there's a knock at the door. It's right around midnight and they're both in bed. He said they were both up just watching a TV show or something. And so he goes to answer the door because he just thinks it's this old woman for some reason. But when he answers the door, there's two children standing there and they're in like dated clothes. He said, I don't know how to describe it. Probably something from like the 1930s or 1940s. Like they were clean, but these clothes were clearly very old. But it was their eyes that made him take a step back because they were completely black. He said there were no whites, but he thought it was something genetic and he didn't want to be rude and stare. So he was kind of avoiding eye contact. And so he just says, can I help you with anything? And they point inside the door past him, like toward his bedroom, and say, can we have some hair from the baby? And he thought he misheard them because he's like, hair from the baby. And so his girlfriend comes up behind him, and she's clearly very pregnant, like she's due next month. And she's like, Sean, what do they need? And the little girl cuts her off and says, can we have hair from the baby? And she points at her belly. And he said these kids were probably like 8 and 10, like a boy and a girl, very young, too young to be out alone late at night. And so they're looking at each other, and finally his girlfriend's like, do you two live in the building? And they say, yeah. And they point down the hall toward a door. She says, are your parents home? And they say, yeah, down there. And she says, okay, I think you should go home. And they close the door behind the kids. So they watch them walk down the hall and go in that door and close it behind them. So they go back to bed, and he said that night he was just unsettled by the whole thing. He thought about what the woman said. He thought about the kids. He's like, that was so strange, them asking for the hair of the baby. But he said he doesn't really know the people that were like living in this building. Like he assumed all kinds of people were living in there, so he just tried to put it out of his mind. But it happened 2 more times. These kids came back, and it was always around midnight. The second time they came, they asked for a sip of milk, and he said he didn't have any. The third time they came back, they asked for a piece of ribbon, and he said when he looked out in the hallway, he saw the old woman standing on the stairs going up to the next floor. She was just watching the whole exchange, like she knew these kids. So he looks up at her, he says, do you know them? And she just shakes her head, and she goes upstairs. Once again, he tells these kids to go home. But the next night there's another knock, and he's getting sick of it at this point because they need to get some sleep. They're both working. But when he answers the door, it's not the kids, it's the old woman, and she's shaking. She looks angry, and she's got another fruitcake in her hands, and she pushes it into his hands, and she says, you have to stop letting them in your mind. She said, I told you not to open the door. And she's yelling at him at this point. So at this point, his girlfriend grabs him, closes the door in her face, and she's like, everyone in this building is crazy. So he said about a week ago, he needed to make a maintenance call because something was acting up with their sink. And so he calls the maintenance guy. He comes out to check it out. And while the maintenance guy's there, he's asking them about like the children. And he's like, I'm concerned about neglect. If the kids that live down the hall are okay? And the maintenance guy looks at him weird. And he said he just knew when this guy looked at him that the answer was going to be weird. And the maintenance guy says, nobody's lived in that apartment unit for years. Like I've worked here for almost 10 years and no one has lived in that unit. But he said he and his girlfriend have seen people go inside. So he tells the maintenance guy this. The maintenance guy says, okay, I'm going to go check it out. It could be squatters. They go in, place is perfectly clean. Not a sign of life. Not a sign of life. He said they're currently looking for another place to live because they don't know what's going on with this building, with this old woman, with this fruitcake she keeps bringing over. But he said the knocking has continued and they have just stopped answering the door. I will keep you guys updated on this one if I hear anything else.
Did you know that the legend of the black-eyed children started after multiple people reported seeing little girls with completely black eyes in Cannock Chase, which is the area where serial unaliver Raymond Morris abducted several of his victims. An 18-year-old woman made the first report in 1982 when she was hanging out in Cannock Chase with some friends, partying and having a good time, when she said she heard a little girl screaming for help. She said she saw a little girl around 6 to 8 years old running toward the woods screaming, "Help, mommy, help." She chased after her but eventually lost her as she got to the woods. The police were called, but they never found the little girl. When Raymond Morris passed away in 2014, there was a rash of sighting of black-eyed girls in the area. One man reported, "On Saturday the 13th of September, my wife and I were walking through Cannock Chase with our dog. Once we had entered the woodland and the road was no longer visible, we started to hear the giggling noise of a little girl. To our amazement, a child no taller than 1 meter in height appeared as if out of nowhere further up the path in front of us. We stopped dead in our tracks after noticing her eyes had no color. Her head was tilted to the side in much the same way it would appear if she had been hung. She stared at us for a few minutes before running away into a densely grouped area of trees. My wife wanted to follow her, but I was having none of it." Another woman recalled, "Around 2 months ago, my daughter and I were walking through the area when we heard the screams of a young child. I couldn't tell if it was a boy or a girl, but they definitely seemed in distress and sounded very close to us, so we instantly started running toward the noise. We couldn't find the child anywhere, and so stopped to catch our breath. That's when I turned around and saw a girl stood behind me, no more than 10 years old, with her hands over her eyes like she was waiting for a birthday cake. I asked her if she was okay, and if she had been the one screaming. Then she put her arms down by her side and opened her eyes, which is when I saw they were completely black, no iris, no white, nothing. I jumped back and grabbed my daughter, and when I looked again, the child was gone. It was strange, really. I knew something was going to happen even before it did. I just had a weird feeling." And yet another mother was looking through the photos of her children in Cannock Chase in 2014 when she spotted the, quote, ghostly figure of a child in a Victorian dress standing to the left of a tree where her children were climbing. We were on a family walk one afternoon and the kids decided to climb a tree. I stopped to take a photo, but it wasn't until I got home that I spotted a child's face looking back at me. Plenty of other people claim to have caught footage or photos of what they all say are little girls under the age of 10 with completely black eyes. So what do you think? Are these the victims of Raymond Morris doomed to haunt these woods forever?
I have a black-eyed kid. Story time. The person who submitted this wishes to remain anonymous, so for the sake of the story, we're gonna call her Brenda. When Brenda was about 8 years old, she lived in a trailer home with her mom and 14-year-old sister. Now mind you, her mom used to work night shift, which meant that she would sleep for most of the day. This story took place on a Saturday morning. At about 11 a.m., Brenda is in the living room watching cartoons while her sister is in the bedroom. Meanwhile, her mom is also asleep in her bedroom. When out of nowhere, Brenda hears a knock at the door. She looks through the screen and sees a 12-year-old boy and about an 8-year-old girl standing there. Before Brenda has even a chance to say that she's on the other side of the door, the boy looks right at the window and says, "May we please come in? We can't find our way home and really need to call our parents." Brenda has always been told about stranger danger, so she didn't want to automatically open the door, so she decides to call her 14-year-old sister. When her sister comes out, Brenda explains the situation. Her sister automatically just opens the door and lets the two kids in. Quick little side note, I'm in my car making the video, just minding my business, when this random guy just walks up to my window and says, "Have a good day, I love you," and then walks away. So I ended up having to go home because that guy kept circling around the area. But back to the story. As soon as Brenda's sister let the two kids in, Brenda felt like this heaviness at the pit of her stomach. She felt like something was just wrong. Before she had a chance to even say anything, her mom wakes up and storms out of her room and starts yelling, saying, "Why are these two kids in here? They don't belong here. They need to leave." It was almost like her mom could sense like the heaviness in the atmosphere. Very calmly, the two kids just put the phone down, got up, and walked out of the door. Brenda saw from the window as they continued to walk all the way to the edge where the forest was, and they just continued on into the forest. Not long after their encounter with the black-eyed children, Brenda's mom became ill. She started to lose a ton of weight. The doctors could not figure out what was wrong with her until she was finally diagnosed with a very rare form of leukemia. In a matter of 6 months, her mom was gone. Shortly after, her 14-year-old just got up and left and completely went missing. Brenda never heard from her again. Brenda ended up going into foster care, which is a completely different story all on its own. Till this day, Brenda blames the encounter she had with the black-eyed children as the reason for why her life just completely fell apart.
Teacher messaged and told me about the creepiest student she ever had, and it was a student with black eyes. Okay, she said that she thought this was a medical condition until she met the parents, and she said she'd been a 4th grade teacher for 12 years at this point when she met this student, and she'd dealt with a lot. Some kids are just weird. She said she'd had kids that like barked when they were bored, some kids that just like hid under tables, and she just learned never to ask questions, or at least you stop asking why by like the first 5 years of teaching. But she said she still thinks about this student, and she was transferred into her class on a random Wednesday in October. There were no health files, no cumulative records, and no advance notice. It was just an email from the secretary that said, "So-and-so student will be placed in your classroom. Attendance starts today due to rezoning," or something like that. She didn't want to get too specific, but she said she teaches at a Title I school about 45 minutes from the main city. And she's used to a lot of students whose family live in RVs or between shelters or family members. It's highly transient where she works. There's lots of turnover, and a lot of times when she gets a student, the paperwork is processing. So she doesn't really know a lot about these students when they come into her classroom. She said the process with these students would just be to give them a desk, give them a name tag, and like wait for the paperwork to catch up. But this student struck her as odd because this girl didn't say anything and her eyes were completely black, like no whites of her eyes. She described them as just inky black orbs. They were black edge to edge, and she said she made a note to ask the nurse about it, but she figured it was some ocular condition that she was not familiar with. She asks the little girl to introduce herself, and the little girl doesn't say anything. And the other kids are visibly shaken and upset by this student. Like, they don't want anything to do with her. This one boy asks if he can move seats. He doesn't want to sit behind her. Another student starts complaining that she's watching her too hard. She said even the class hamster would not come near this girl. She said she tried to connect with this girl. She offered her books. She asked what her hobbies were. She gave her crayons to color. And this little girl would grind the crayons into like a powdered dust. A few days pass, this girl still is not talking. She goes to the front office and she's asking if they've received any kind of records about this little girl, and they just said that it's a temporary placement and that they don't have any records for her. They just said that the family was in transition and they would drop off the paperwork the following week. And she said that's not that uncommon. Like, it happens sometimes with like off the grid families or people that have been homeschooled that are trying to re-enter the school zone, or with like migrant families. She said you just kind of learn not to push in her district. And so she really couldn't do much about it. And then came the week of the parent-teacher conferences. That she was meeting with the families as usual, and she had almost forgotten that this little girl was on the form because her contact box was still blank in the online grade form. So she's not expecting anyone to show up for this little girl, but they do. She said they looked normal enough. Like the mom was very thin, had high cheekbones, was very pretty, wore her hair in a long braid, and the father was very tall but very thin. And he was wearing this like nice new crisp suit. And she said it was like almost like he had never worn it out in public before, like he had saved it for that occasion. She said they were very polite and very calm, but it almost seemed performative. Like they didn't seem like real people that you would be having a conversation with. Anyway, she starts the whole routine. She tells them that their daughter seems to be adjusting, but she's very, very quiet, like abnormally quiet. She tells them that although she's testing well and doing her schoolwork, she would like to find ways to make her more sociable. And she asks if she has any friends or siblings or anything outside of school that where she's basically around people. And the mother's like, oh, she's always been quiet. She listens more than she talks. The father's like, yeah, we don't do small talk. She doesn't do small talk. Like she talks to us. She can talk. He's like, she's always been this way, but like, you know, it's fine. Like, don't worry too much about that as long as she's doing her schoolwork. And so the teacher who messaged says, well, do you have any concerns about her development or her schoolwork or anything like that? And the mother's like, has she said anything to you? And this woman's like, what do you mean? Has she said anything? She's like, well, about anything she sees. And teacher's like, I'm not really following. And the mother's like, well, sometimes she sees unusual things, like things that haven't happened yet. And she said that the way she said it was like very flat, like almost like she was talking about like a food allergy or something. Like she didn't seem concerned by it. She was just like matter of factly, like, yeah, she sees things that haven't happened. And so the teacher's like, well, no, she really doesn't talk much, so she hasn't said anything about that. And the parents both kind of make like a noise and just look at each other. They don't seem that concerned. And then the mother looks at the teacher again and she's like, she told us she doesn't like the window in your room. So the teacher looks at the window and it's just like a normal window. She said outside it was like a concrete pad that they use as like a jungle gym area. And she was like, what doesn't she like about it? And she said, oh, she says it opens the wrong way. And she says, what do you mean it opens the wrong way? It's a normal window. The mother's like, yeah, she says that it can let things in that she doesn't like. And before she can even say anything, the father stands up and he reaches out his hand. He shakes her hand. He's like, thank you so much. Like, we'll be in touch if we need anything from you. Like, thanks for meeting with us. She was like, it was literally the weirdest parent-teacher conference I have ever had. And they walk out and she's watching them cross the parking lot, like where all the cars are parked, but they don't get in a car. They keep walking into a field, which eventually turns into trees. She said what's weird is there's no sidewalk back there. It's just like a chain link fence at the edge of the property where the school district boundary ends. Beyond that, it's marshland. So she checks the sign-in sheet after they walk off and she's like talking to another teacher about it and she realizes that they never checked in. So the next day, it's an admin day for her, but all of the students were not in school for some reason. And she goes to the office and she's asking the office if the family has filled out the paperwork yet. And that's when they tell her that the daughter will no longer be in her class. She was vanished from the roster with no withdrawal, transfer, or record or anything like that. And the administrator told her it must have been a mistake, like a ghost record. She said, I guess can happen sometime due to like accidental duplication when the administration is rushed. I don't know. I have no background in education at all. I'm just reading off her email. So she's kind of just like, okay, that's sad, but like she's probably transferred somewhere else, like whatever. She's got other students to teach, you know? And so she goes back to what she's doing. She teaches as normal. A couple weeks go by and she finds this class photo that they had taken and she's looking through it and she's looking for this student and she realizes she's not in the picture. She thinks that's strange because like this girl stood out to her every day that she was in class and she felt like she would have remembered if she wasn't there one day. But the year carries on, they finish out the school year, and right before the school year ends, there's this other little girl that's transferred to her class and she ends up taking this old student's seat, the girl with the black eyes. The little girl who is sitting next to this new student, you know, is like making friends with this new little girl. And the teacher says to her, oh, do you remember so-and-so, the student with the black eyes? And the student did not remember her. In fact, nobody in the class remembered her. She said it was the weirdest thing. She still has no explanation for it. Maybe it was just a student that they had like blocked from their memory for some reason because they were afraid of her. I don't know. Yeah, I hope everything is okay with this little girl. She said that happened a couple years ago, so I don't know where she's at now. But black-eyed children's stories are creepy. If you have a spooky, scary story time, feel free to send it to me. I love right now the ones related to your job. So if you have something weird happen to you at your job, send it to me. I post a new story almost every single day.
Whatever you do, if you hear a knock at your door at night and it's black-eyed children, do not open that door. Actually, don't open the door for anyone late at night. So I've heard about this black-eyed children phenomenon ever since I was little, and one of my followers sent me their experience with them, and honestly, I'm in shock. So if you don't know, the black-eyed children are described as kids between like 6 to 16, and they often appear to be dressed in like old-fashioned clothing. They have completely black eyes, no whites, no irises, and it's the most captivating, most creepy feature about them. They typically approach houses or cars late at night asking to either use your phone or to come in. It's just the way that they ask is very unsettling. They demand to come in, and because they're children, it gives people the unexplainable feeling to let them in. So these kids have a very unnatural aura to them. It's very dark and their energy is so heavy. It's said that when you encounter them, you get a sense of dread, anxiety, terror. You just feel really uncomfortable. But there's something urging you to let them in. It's also said these kids could be lost souls of ghosts, vampires, spirits, or even aliens. No one really knows, but what people do know is that if you ever encounter these kids and you let them into your house or car, you're doomed. These kids have very dark intentions to you, but not physically, psychologically. So my follower Michael told me his story with them, and I'm just like chills all over my body. He told me this encounter didn't happen to him, but instead to his uncle. It's a generational story that his family passes down to everyone, and now he wants to share it with me and you guys just in case, so y'all don't end up like his uncle. Now, before I begin, everything that I'm saying is what his uncle documented before his tragic death. Michael told me this happened back in 1999, a few days before New Year's, and at the time people already thought the world was gonna end on New Year's Day, so paranoia was at an all-time high. Michael said it was December 29th, 1999 on a Wednesday. His uncle was setting up New Year's decorations all around the house because his family would be coming over in just 2 days. He said it was around 1 a.m. when his uncle heard a random knock at the door. Tired from putting up decorations for nearly 3 hours, he got down from his ladder and walked over to his window to see 3 children standing at his doorstep. He said they all had blonde hair, 2 were boys tall in height, almost twin-like, and 1 small little girl. His uncle said they had on clothes that made them look like they were from 1860 and somehow took a time machine to year 1999. Michael said his uncle laughed to himself and ended up yelling, "It's too late to be knocking on people's doors," loud enough for the kids to hear him. After he said that, his uncle heard frantic knocking at the door and the voice of the little girl saying, "Please open the door, please, please open, we need help." Confused and scared because these were children, he immediately ran over to his door, turned on the porch light, and opened the door. When the door swung open and he was looking face to face at these children, he said they were pale, their hair looked really roughed up, as well as their clothes. It was almost as if they were like rolling in mud or even just on the ground. And he said each child had pitch black eyes. He remembers his body started to shake and he got this feeling of wanting to throw up. He remembers the girl pointing to the inside of the house and asking, "Can we come in?" Now keep in mind this little girl didn't look at him once, just straightforward, no smile, nothing. Same with the boys, and his uncle said that it was like they were looking through him, not at him. Michael's uncle said he had the urge to slam the door in their face, but something about them, something about their energy made him keep that door open. So he ends up saying, "What do you guys want? Where are your parents?" One of the tall boys ended up talking and he said, "Please let us in. They're coming. We need to go inside." The other boy beside him then said, "Just give us the okay to come in. Please let us in." After he heard the words, "They're coming," he immediately told the children to come inside, completely ignoring the fact that not only did they have these pitch black, weird alien eyes, but something like his instincts were even telling him not to let them in, but he still decided to. Michael said what happened next shocked him and his family when they read over these documented diaries. His uncle said that when the kids entered the house, the lights ended up flickering on and off one time, and then they all sat on the couch staring at the turned off TV. He said he started to get a feeling of dread and unhappiness. His eyes felt heavy and he had the urge to go upstairs and sleep, which he ended up doing. He said he remembers telling the kids to make themselves at home and that he was going to bed. And then as he was walking to his room, he started to hear chuckling and then it just went blank. His uncle said when he woke up, he walked into the living room only to find the kids left. There was no trace of them, nothing. It was like a fever dream. He thought that was it and he did his good deed before the year ended, but things ended up getting a lot worse. His uncle documented how that whole entire day he started to have hallucinations of the children. He was seeing them everywhere and they would tell him to do things, bad things, that his own body and mind would force him to do, but after it was done, the kids, they would disappear again. He kept hearing laughter, his vision was acting up, and the world that he once saw was now different and dark. It was driving him to insanity. Michael said his uncle did end up reaching out to his family about this, but they did not believe him at all. Michael said his uncle probably could not handle this crazy hallucinations that were happening to him and probably really just wanted it all to stop but didn't know how, because he ended up writing these diaries explaining what he was seeing, and after he offed himself. Michael said after investigation, there were no DNA of these kids, not even when they sat on the couch. The only evidence of these children is what his uncle wrote. Now, Michael said his uncle never suffered with anything. He was not depressed. So this was very, very shocking news when his family got the call about it. But now his family never opens the door for anyone at night, and these diaries are kept as a reminder.
This story took place in Vermont in January of 2016. This took place in the middle of a blizzard. Maria was home alone with her husband when she heard a knock at the door, and it was two children standing there completely barefoot. The woman was, of course, shocked to see these two children standing there in the middle of this blazing blizzard, barefoot, shivering, like pretty much crying for help. The kids asked the woman if they could use her phone, so she, without even realizing it, she let them in. Like, she's like, come right on in. When they got into her living room and the light kind of hit their faces, she noticed that their eyes were all completely pitch black. Like, there was no white in them, it was just black. As the woman stood there in horror, she looked over and saw that her husband's nose began to bleed. Just then, the lights went out in the whole house. After what felt like an eternity, the children began to speak, and in unison, almost like they were chanting, they said that their parents had arrived and that it was time for them to go. As they walked outside, the woman, Maria, looked outside and saw when the two kids got into a black car and drove off. But not long after this encounter, Maria's husband was diagnosed with skin cancer. Maria herself began to suffer from frequent nosebleeds and a long list of medical problems. She is convinced that the reason for her and her husband's health problems is because she let them in.
If you see some children with some pitch black eyes, please go the other way. Now let's talk about it. Now, I've done a video on the black-eyed children and black-eyed people, but someone just sent me a story telling me they thought they had an encounter with one a few weeks ago, and I just had to talk about this again because this stuff is real and it's so scary. Now, the black-eyed children or the black-eyed kids, whatever you want to call them, is an urban legend of paranormal creatures that resemble children ranging from the age of 6 to 16. And they usually have pale skin and pitch black eyes, and they're reportedly seen hitchhiking, panhandling, or at the doorsteps of residents' homes. So what they'll do is they'll pretend like they're lost and be like, hey, can I call my mommy or daddy or something like that to get you? Because it's a kid and you're just going to assume that they need help because they're a kid alone. And most of the time they'll come walking up to your car when it's dark at night and you really can't see their eyes. And they're typically wearing outdated clothes. That's another way to spot these creatures. They're typically wearing outdated clothes. And you might see them approaching your car when you're waiting at the gas station or something like that. They are so creepy, y'all. Now, some conspiracy theorists highly believe that these creatures are actual aliens that came down to Earth, and demonologists believe that they're children of the devil himself, and if you let them in, it's the end for you. Everything after that will just be horrible. But the thing that make this stuff so creepy is there's been several cases all over the world with similar stories of these black-eyed children or these black-eyed people, and then them coming to their homes, same stories with people with no connection or ties with each other. So it has to be some type of truth to this. And people that have actually made eye contact with them say that it's way more sinister. It is extremely creepy, and how things just go so wrong after they encounter with these children. But like I said, they'll try to come into your home on a late, cold night, or they'll approach you while you're at the stoplight or anywhere, and they'll typically try to have their head down. So of course, you can't see their eyes, because if you see their eyes, you're probably gonna get scared and drive off. But yeah, please don't go near these people. 9 times out of 10, and you're not gonna see an outdated wearing, I'm talking about looking like pilgrims walking around at night in the cold, asking can you use their phone or can you call their parents or come to your house. But let me know what y'all think, or if y'all ever encounter or heard stories of people talking about these black-eyed children, because like I said, a follower requested me to talk about this because they thought they encountered one in Texas not too long ago, and most stories I hear about is around the Texas area. So what is that about? But let me know what y'all think about this.
This story comes out of Phoenix. Now, there was this older couple who lived near Scottsdale, and they said that one night they were sitting in their living room watching a movie. They said there was a really bad thunderstorm out, and they just remembered hearing the rain hit the roof of the house. Well, all of a sudden, they start hearing a knock at the door. And they thought, that's odd. Who would be here this late at night during a thunderstorm? But they were the kind of people who would open the door for anyone, and they would help out anybody in need. So the old man, he goes and he answers the door. And when he opens the door, the older woman feels like a strange breeze kind of blowing, which she just assumed was from the storm. They both see these two men standing at the front door. They are wearing black suits and ties, and they look just very out of place. And one thing they noticed is that there wasn't any white in their eyes. It was just all black. And they said, yeah, can we help you? Like, what are you doing here late at night? They said, excuse us, our car broke down and we need to use your phone to call someone. Can we come inside? And like I said, them being just sort of this generous old couple, they were like, okay, you can use the phone. Like, yeah, come on in. So these two men walk through the door, and the old lady notices that they were walking like very funny, kind of erratically, as if they had never walked before, and they were trying to figure out like how to walk and how to move their body. They go over to the couch, they sit down, and she says to them, can I get you guys something to drink or something to eat? And they said, no, we're fine. We just need to use the phone. So she said, well, the phone is down this hallway, and it's on the wall. So the one guy got up and he goes to use the phone. The other guy sitting on the couch, they noticed he kept like grabbing his face, like something was wrong with it. And he seemed very irritated, very bothered by something. Well, the old woman decided to go in the kitchen and grab herself some tea. When she walks in the kitchen, she notices the one man who had went to use the phone standing in the hallway, just staring straight ahead. And she's like, are you all right? Like, is everything okay? She said he didn't say anything. She's like, excuse me, sir, are you okay? And she said, then it was like all of a sudden he realized what was going on. He's like, oh, yes, I'm fine. I just used the phone. Our ride will be here soon. So then he walked down the hallway and he sat back on the couch. Well, the old woman, she started feeling really, really sick. And she felt like she was getting nauseous, and she sat down in the kitchen. Her husband, who's sitting out talking to them, right, he starts feeling kind of nauseous. He starts feeling kind of sick. And that's when these two men said, our ride will be here soon, and then we will be gone. So the old man gets up and he goes into the kitchen. He tells his wife, like, something's wrong. Like, I'm not feeling good. And I think I'm getting sick. And the wife says, I don't feel good either. Like, yeah, something is off. They go back out into the living room. The two men are gone. They are nowhere in the house. But the odd thing was the door was locked from the inside. So how could they have gone out the door and managed to lock it? Because they didn't have a key. They look outside. They look all around. These people are nowhere to be found. They assumed, they must have got a ride and left. Well, over the next couple of months, they had this strange illness, and they kept getting sicker and sicker. Eventually, the old man passed away, and they could never really explain what was wrong with him, what this illness was. But his wife believed it had something to do with that encounter with these two men.
If a child showed up in the middle of the night to knock on your door, would you answer it? You may not want to, because it could destroy your life. Tonight's true scary story really freaked me out because anything to do with the kids or old people in the paranormal is my two bugaboos. If you're new here, hi, I'm so glad that you're here. My name is Kaisa, and I tell true scary stories that you guys submit to me through email on here every single night. So if you want to submit me a story, my email is in my bio. It's kaisaspooky@gmail.com. Also, my YT link is in my bio, where I tell scarier stories and longer versions of stories. Okay, let's get started. We're gonna call today's submitter Jessie, and 6 years ago, Jessie lived in Kentucky for a little bit. Partner was working nights and she was working days, so they never saw each other, and she was already convinced that her one-bedroom apartment was haunted. Her apartment would not be the scariest thing that happened to her there. Because she felt like the apartment was haunted, she spent a lot of time outside talking to her neighbors and walking her dog. But as I said, her partner worked nights, so she was always home alone, and her dog was always growling at the front door, and this really freaked her out. She figured, though, that the dog was just sensing other people talking because there was an apartment right next to theirs with neighbors. One night, it was around 12 or 1 a.m. in the morning, and she was watching TV, but then this started to happen. The dog was growling at the door, and she whispered for her to stop, and she did stop, but she laid down next to the door and just stared at it. I'm sorry, but this alone would freak me out because dogs know more than humans do, and they sense stuff, and so I would be like, no ma'am. About 10 to 15 minutes later, someone knocks on the door after her dog has been sitting by the door this entire time. Now, mind you, no one has ever knocked on her door before the entire time that she lived in the apartment. She looks out the door through the peephole, and she sees this 11 or 12-year-old kid with a hoodie on. on. Before she could do or say anything, the kid says,
"Ma'am, could I come inside and show you the products I'm advertising?"
and then alarm bells start going off for about a million different reasons. Number one, how did he know that she was by the door? She was incredibly quiet. Number two, what was he doing out at 1 a.m. in the morning by himself? And number three, how did he know that she was a ma'am? She figured that the kid had backup and she was being set up. He was wearing a hoodie and she could not see his face at all. She just stays silent, but he knocks several more times, repeating the same phrase,
"Ma'am, can I come inside and show you the products I'm advertising?"
over and over again. He was really trying to get her to open the door, but when she wouldn't do it, after a little bit, he finally gave up and he walked across to the neighbor's house, which was about 10 to 15 feet away from hers. There's only a small sidewalk that ran between the two buildings from her and her neighbor's house. So when he walked over there, he just knocked once and she actually opened the door. He didn't even say anything. As soon as she opens the door, immediately she screams bloody murder for her husband and slams the door in the kid's face. The next morning, that neighbor came over to Jesse's house and said, "Did a kid come to your door last night and knock on it?" And Jesse says, "Yes, I didn't answer. And then I saw him go over to your house and I saw that you answered the door. Like, what's up?" And the woman goes, when I opened that door, his eyes were completely black. She didn't know or understand back then, but she does now. Because a month after this happened, this woman went through hell. She went through a horrific divorce where she lost everything. She lost her property that was elsewhere. She lost all of her money and she lost a car. She doesn't know if she ended up getting sick too, but she does know that she lost like everything. She lost a lot. Jessie is so thankful that she didn't open that door that night because she looks back on it and she was newly pregnant. She didn't know anything about black-eyed kids and she was only 2 hours away from Appalachia. She would often visit Appalachia because she had family there. She ended up moving to Vegas shortly after this, and nothing like this ever happened to her ever again. But she does have more stories, something that is going on with her right now that she said she's going to send in. Apparently she's going through some type of haunting right now, and I think I want to hear it. Let me know if you guys want to hear it. Drop it in the comments. And also tell me your thoughts on this one. Do you think that the black-eyed kid had anything to do with that woman losing absolutely everything? Do you think that if she would have answered the door, that she maybe would have lost her baby or something terrible would have happened to her? Does anyone else know of any stories where black-eyed children came to your door or someone else's door? Drop that in the comments. I know this was a short one, but I hope you guys enjoyed. My name is Kaisa and I tell true scary stories every single night, so if you like that, hit that follow button. I am so grateful to have all of your support, especially on my last video. Truly, I mean it so much. Like, you guys are the absolute best. I am so lucky. I just need you guys to do 2 things for me, and what are those? Have a safe night, and what? Have a spooky night. Love you guys. See you in the next one.